lymphatic system. Number one, fluid balance. Remember, when we have a blood vessel turning in from a met arteriole to a capillary, that we have fluid movement in the capillaries. On the artery end of the capillaries, you're going to push out about 10 millimeters of mercury, of water, outwards on the capillary end. On the venial end, that 9 millimeters come right back in, so that you're able to push water out into the fluid space, and then 90% of the fluid you push out comes right back in, almost suction right back in. The extra 10% goes into our lymphatic system. By the way, right, when we get a cut, ever wonder why whenever you get a cut anywhere, there's always that kind of issue where that area becomes really big and swells up, right? There's a reason why it swells up. And the reason is because of the lymphatic system, right? Remember, when we're talking about where we see our white blood cells, most of the white blood cells are not going to be in the area where you get those infections. You have very little white blood cells on your skin and integument. Most of the white blood cells will be in your lymph nodes, in your spleen, right? You'll have some in your, floating around in your blood vessels. But in general, most of your white blood cells are in lymph nodes and the spleen area, right? So it will make sense to bring any kind of infective organisms into those areas of the lymph nodes. What else do we see? Fat absorption. This is a weird one, right? Fat absorption is lymphatic system. And we're going to see, for fats don't get absorbed into your hepatic portal vein. Not like your amino acids, not like your carbohydrates. Fats and fat-soluble vitamins go into our lymphatic system, then gets transferred all the way up by a series of lymphatic vessels. Some are big, thoracic duct, which we'll talk about next week. And then eventually, that fat and some of the fluid will be then reintroduced into your bloodstream as we meet the lymphatic system to our veins. All right? So we're going to see that fat absorption is one of the functions of the lymphatic system. Kind of a weird function, but it is a function. Defense. Obviously, defense is a big one. This is where most of our white blood cells are found. And our white blood cells, some of them are very specific. Some of them are general, meaning that if you have a neutrophil, it's only going to attach to bacterium, but that bacterium could be, all right, it could be strep, it could be staph, all right, it could be clostridium, it can be different types of bacterium. And all of those types of bacterium will be destroyed by the neutrophils. Now, again, when we have that kind of recognition, right? Recognition in terms of cell to cell requires a receptor. So what neutrophils have are very general receptors that allows it to recognize certain proteins that are found on multiple types of bacterium. So it is a kind of, we're going to see in terms of staph, strep, all of these gram-positive type of bacterium are going to have very similar type of polysaccharides and lipopolysaccharides sticking out of their cell wall. And what we're going to see is those similar type of polysaccharides will be then recognized by receptors on the neutrophils. So, and these are found on the same thing. And I'm going to use an example, right? Trying to find somebody that looks exactly like Day is going to be hard. To look exactly like her in every way. It's going to be really hard, right? Unless she has an identical twin laying around somewhere, right? So usually we don't. But what we do is this. We can find people that kind of have black hair, right? Have brown eyes. And now we have a larger population that we can kind of, recognize not just the whole Day right here, but parts of her. And that's what we're going to do when we start discussing these cells. How do they recognize? Do they recognize the whole thing? Or do they recognize specific traits? Now, in terms of anatomy of the lymphatic system, we will talk about these lymph nodes on the sides of your neck. We call them the anterior cervical nodes. And notice where they're draining from. Your throat. right? No, those lymphatic vessels are going to eventually drain all their fluid along with anything found in the fluid. So if you have a sore throat, what happens? Well, how many times when you're a kid, you have a sore throat, your mom kind of palpates your neck, and then she notices that you have swollen glands. Right? Should you have any glands on the side of your neck? Not unless you have a really big thymus, right? But even then, you're not really going to feel that. What she's really feeling are these anterior cervical nodes right here. And what's happening is this. You have an infection. Usually it's viral infection. Now what happens? Your neck starts to swell a little bit. It starts to become very inflamed. It hurts, all right, causing even more inflammation. As you have more inflammation, then more fluid is brought into the lymphatic vessels and into the lymphatic nodes. And since you're having a viral infection, the fluid contains viruses that you're now bringing to the lymphatic nodes where your white blood cells are. Now your white blood cell starts killing the viruses in the nodes, causing a big reaction in the nodes. And the node starts to swell up, right? And it's a sign that your body can tolerate this kind of infection, which is good. The problem is, as we get older, especially people who are elderly, you will see that we know they're sick. We can look in their, chest x-ray, they have pneumonia. But when we look at a CBC, the white blood cell count is like 10,000, normal, right? That means that they have a pneumonia and they can't mount an immune defense at that point, and that's a bad sign. Now, all of these are part of our lymphatic system. Lymph nodes being a very important one, tonsils, spleen, and the weird one is thymus, because the thymus actually goes away as we become adults. Lymphatic system and structure. The system consists of fluid called lymph, kind of makes sense, flowing within the lymphatic vessels. The fluid is formed by the filtration and reabsorption of the blood capillaries. Remember, 10% of what is filtered goes into lymphatic system and turns into lymph. Right? Now, lymph, is going to become, lymph is very similar to interstitial fluid because it comes from the interstitial fluid. And how is that different from plasma? Plasma has more proteins, a lot of albumin, stuff like that. Lymphatic tissue and lymphatic fluid and an interstitial fluid does not. It's basically sodium, potassium, calcium, and water. That's it. Now, the difference between interstitial fluid and lymph is location. Interstitial fluid is found throughout your body. Now, there's a belief and there's kind of a push to call the interstitium the new organ. I know it's kind of weird, right? We found a new organ. There's this big news on CNN in the last summer that they're going to call it a new organ. And obviously people say, oh, a new organ. What new organ do we all have? And it's the interstitium. Yeah, it's kind of a dud kind of thing. You don't hear about it much anymore. Now, when we talk about lymphatic vessels, look at how they're interspersed within the blood capillaries. So they start out as lymphatic capillaries. The difference is, unlike a blood capillary, like we see here, you have one side that's connected to an artery or arterial, one side that's connected to the venule, meaning it's connected unit, right? You go from artery to arterial to capillary and then to venule and veins. Is one complete circle in terms of blood movement. So you move blood out through the arteries, it goes through the capillaries, and then returns to the vein. A closed system, right? That's connected to each other. Well, in terms of the lymphatic system, it's not directly connected to the bloodstream. So it starts as a closed end area right here. Like, think of a test tube, right? The very end point of the test tube is a start right here. Now, what we're going to see is the lymphatic capillaries are going to be very similar to the blood capillaries, except they're more permeable. And we're going to see the lymphatic capillaries are going to have a series of one-way valves. And we're going to see capillaries that for the lymphatic system, lymphatic vessels are going to be very similar to veins, right? In other words, since it's not connected to the heart, you need to somehow bring the capillaries, the blood in the lymphatic capillaries, all right, or the lymph in the lymphatic capillaries, somehow back to the cardiovascular system. And it's going to use the same mechanism as we see in a vein. A vein has valves. These lymphatic vessels have valves. A vein is going to be very close, especially the deep one, very close to muscles, right? So are these lymphatic vessels. They're very close to the muscles. And the same mechanism, the respiratory pump, the skeletal muscle pump, that allows us to move blood into, all right, from the lower legs to the inferior vena cava. Those are actually the same system we use to move lymphatic fluid from the lower leg up into, right, the thoracic duct. So take a look here. They resemble veins, but with thinner walls and more valves. They begin as close-ended tubes, and they're going to be kind of sandwiched between all these different cells right here. Fluid flows from the lymphatic nodes towards large veins and eventually empty into the bloodstream at your subclavian veins. So you have the left and right subclavian veins. You'll see in a second that we will have lymphatic fluid being dumped into these subclavian veins. And again, since it's like interstitial fluid, it's very easily incorporated into our bloodstream. Now, big thing right here is knowing the difference between how lymph drains from whichever side of the body we're at. So the thoracic duct is the biggest single, lymphatic vessel, and hopefully I can show you a picture right here. So here's your lymphatic duct right here. This picture shows us that in order for this thoracic duct will allow us to drain all lymphatic fluid from your lower legs, from your half of your thorax and abdomen, and the left side of your arm and head. So just about everything but your right half of your face and head, right side of your thorax and abdomen, and right arm, right? So for the most part, your full lower body, most of your abdomen, and then the left half of your body, upper body, all that lymphatic fluid will drain into the thoracic duct and go into the left subclavian vein. The right lymphatic duct is going to only bring fluid back from your right upper body. That's it, right? So the right side of your face, the right side of your head, your right arm, right shoulder, right chest, right part of your abdomen, all that fluid gets returned back by way of a different duct, the right lymphatic duct. Again, just kind of understanding that there is a difference in how we're bringing that fluid back. This kind of goes into a little bit more detail about this. Now, in terms of these one-way valves, it's kind of cool what happens. Right? So this lymphatic capillaries right here, lymphatic capillaries, slightly larger diameter than blood capillaries, have a series of overlapping endothelial cells, which works as one-way valves for fluid to enter the lymphatic capillaries.